everybody. Good morning. All right. We just wanted to introduce Mr. Lindenbaum. And he's here to talk about his experiences during World War II. So we're just going to be a great audience, and we just appreciate you coming. He's been coming a couple of years already for us. And then at the end, we'll take questions at the very end.
First, you got to tell me if I need the mic. And you got to tell me the truth. Can you really hear me? Or is this better? This is better. Okay, then turn it up. Oh, I don't have it. Now it's better? Yes. Okay. So, why do I talk? Because I don't believe that it's the bad people that are the problem. I think it's when we see bad things happening and we just turn away and we don't say anything. My family was over maybe 120 years ago. They lived in Galicia, which is now the Ukraine, and they were not doing well. My grandfather ended up with 11 children, and he was looking for a place to move, where he would be welcome and where he could make a living. And he looked around, and he finally picked Hanover, which is in Germany, and that's about 1907. And he moved his family there, and he was Jewish, I'm Jewish, and when they got to Hanover in Germany, they were really welcome. They were welcomed by the Jewish community, they were welcomed by the Christian community, and they were able to have a good life. They started a small business, men's clothing, and did really well. That was my grandfather. My father moved to the Ruhr Valley in Germany, to a town called Unna, and it was the same thing. There was a very small Jewish community, but they were welcomed by everybody. I can remember myself when I was 5 years old, that my sister always had friends, a lot of friends, and most of them were not Jewish, and it was just a nice place to be. And then they had a depression. People lost their jobs, the trains stopped running. It looked like the whole society was falling apart. And everybody was nervous about what's going to happen. And one party came along and said, we're going to make Germany great again. And what we're going to do is we're going to make jobs for everybody, the trains are going to run on time, and the whole world is going to finally realize that the German people are better than anybody else, and we won't have people with disabilities, because German people are not going to, that's not going to be the German people. We're not going to, and they went down a list of who they were not going to have, and that included the Jews. And in the beginning, they started to get support because they had kids marching around in uniforms, and then kids started beating up anybody who wasn't exactly like them, who was any different, and they had an election. And in that election, the Nazi Party was voted in with this promise of making the German people better than anybody else. And they also talked about having more room to live in, meaning they were going to expand their borders. And it became very, very difficult for us. I remember my brother coming home from school every day, beaten up. My mother and father didn't let me start school because they thought it was too dangerous. My brother was very stubborn and insisted on going back. And I remember my mother going to the school to speak to the teacher. And she said, he got beaten up in the class yesterday. Do something. And he lied. He said, there's nothing I can do. Well, in some places, people did stand up, and it made a huge difference. It really made a difference. You can ask me later for some examples. And things were getting worse. And 2 weeks before they went totally crazy, they called it Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, where they burnt down synagogues, beat up Jews, and sent the men into camps. 2 weeks before that, they rounded up $17,000 because our grandparents had come from the east, they said. So that included us. I remember a German officer coming in and clicking his heels and saying, report to the police station. And so you would ask, why didn't my family just get in the car and get out of there? Well, first of all, we didn't even know anybody who had a car. And secondly, the whole world had closed their borders. And there really wasn't any place to go unless you had a lot of money or you had some contacts someplace. So when we got down to the railway station, when I think about that now, I think about refugees at borders today. And their suffering was equal to ours. This super race people kept us there at the train station for 36 hours. And it took me a while to figure out why, because when I did research, I found out they rounded us up on Thursday, and they kept us there till the sun went down on Friday night. We were not that religious, but my grandfather was, and he had never traveled on the Sabbath, and this was just you know, it's just like when I see a bully, the real reason that somebody is a bully is because he doesn't have a good opinion of himself, and by picking on somebody else, that makes him feel better. And so we were on the train, and we were heading towards the border with Poland. It was a scary ride, and I do remember my grandfather starting the Friday night prayers, and that's a nice warm memory for me. And we got to the border with Poland at a town called Benson, and we were made to get off the train. We were allowed to have a small suitcase and in effect no money. And we were then chased across the border, thousands of us, with people with guns and dogs. And there was my blind grandfather. There were people who couldn't walk, the people in wheelchairs, and the Polish guards tried to keep us out, and we overran the border. And again, when I hear about refugees at borders today, those memories come tumbling back. So we were in Poland, and I've heard a lot of things about the Polish people, and just 1 minute on that. When we got across the border, there were peasants with horses and carts that were coming. They said they're there to help us, and what they did was they stole the little suitcases, loaded them on their wagons, and the horses took off. and most people were left with nothing. Again, things like this are happening today at borders. And at that point, we started walking about the 5 miles to Sponsion, which was the closest Polish town. And when I think back and I hear some horrible stories about what some Polish people did and about how they stole our suitcases, here's 17,000 of us in total, came up to a town of 8,000, and they were not bad to us. They let people sleep in the horse stables. They let people sleep on the streets. I was more free to walk around than I had been in my hometown in Germany. And I am really in awe of that those peoples did not harass us. Within 36 hours, some Jewish organizations came from the other side of Poland. And the one thing that I remember that they did for us, they gave us cotton bags. My family had moved into a 4-story, partly burnt-out building with 200 other people. We were on the top floor. There was no water, there was no electricity, there was no heat, and we had got straw, so we could sleep on the straw. And when they brought those bags, that meant an awful lot to us because we, in effect, had a mattress. And that we were there for 10 months. And the Jewish organization that helped us was HIAS, and I'm a little active with HIAS today because HIAS is a Jewish organization which is helping refugees all over the world, including at our border in Mexico. And so we were there for 10 months. During that 10 months, my sister went to a school where she was learning a trade and continuing her education. My grandfather went to a home for the blind, and we struggled. I later got a lot of the letters that my mother and father had sent to Palestine, where we had relatives, begging for warm clothes because we had no heat of any kind. But this was not a bad time for me at all. Here I had my brother, I had a friend, and I was free to go around, which I hadn't been in Germany, and because of volunteers like my mother, everybody ended up having enough to eat, and so for me this was not terrible. But then the German army is on the border, and everybody is really scared because rumors about what they were going to do were coming up, and everybody's down the railway station to try to get on a train to go closer to Russia, to Grodno, and somebody came up and said, the kinder transport is over, but we might be able to get some of the kids on the Polish cruise ships. My mother immediately turned and brought me and my brother over to this guy. They turned around and got on the train. And my friend, Herbert, he started screaming and crying. He was 8 years old. And his mother, who obviously really loved him, came and took and kissed and hugged him and took him with her on the train to Grodno. And I later did research and found out that they'd both been murdered in Auschwitz, as was my mother, father, and sister. And why did they murder 1.5 million children? They murdered them because they had to have at least one Jewish grandparent, and then they would be murdered. And it is so insane to think. If you think you're different than anybody else, I don't care who you're talking about. You have much more in common with everybody than you have differences. And I don't care who they are, the color, or where they come from. I think that when we get to know each other, we know that we're all the same. So we went over to this man, and I got very angry at my parents, and I wiped them out of my head, and I totally wiped them out. Couldn't remember them anymore, didn't want to, because they had left me, while my friend's mother had not. And when we got to Danzig, there was a Polish troop ship there. My sister had joined us. She was going to go too. And some idiot said, she's 14 years old, she's too old, she's not getting on board. And I ran away because I wasn't leaving, and I guess she found me and dragged me back and held me while they shaved the lice out of my hair, shaved my head, and got me and my brother on the boat. And again, when I read stories today about children at borders being separated from parents, it really jumps into my brain. And so sometimes somebody would ask, why do we study the Holocaust when there are so many genocides? Well, the center, first of all, the Holocaust centers do study all kind of genocides, but the difference between this and any other genocide, it was not done to steal their land, which has happened in many places. It was not done to get their money. It was done because they had a gene. They had one grandparent who was Jewish, and therefore they were different. And this is so sick. And so you had the German units, when they were losing the war, instead of fighting the war, they were running around all over Europe looking for Jews to kill. And they really didn't care if they were Jews or not, as long as they had a Jewish grandparent. And like nothing like this has ever happened before, which does not mean that the suffering that is caused by any other genocide or refugees running the borders, the suffering of the family and the parents is the same. I do need some questions. Do I have any yet? Yeah.
How do you feel during the war?
Somebody has to repeat that for me.
How did you feel? He asked during when this was all happening.
My hearing is not good.
And we can have them come up to the mic.
Maybe you can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just go ahead.
All right, if you do, go around and come to the mic. I'll take care of the mic.
Oh.
I'll ask you the question. All right, come on.
Okay.
Come here, come here. Right here. Oh, next to the mic.
How do you feel during the war?
Say it one more time.
How do you feel during the war?
How did you feel during this war?
How did I feel during the war? I was very angry. I was angry at my parents, and I didn't get over that for a long, long, long time. Okay, go ahead.
What did you do after the war? Or where did you live, or what did you do after the war?
Okay, and your question? I'm going to answer you.
What did the Nazis take from you during the war?
What did the Nazis do?
Yeah. So I'll answer those questions. But I did get on the boat, and again, refugees, especially children, when you read about them today, we got to England. Now, England had taken in 10,000 Jewish kids to save their lives, which was an unbelievable thing. In America, they tried to introduce legislation to take in 20,000 kids, and if you read the headlines at the time, there was comments like, we're going to take in 20,000 enemy aliens, and who knows what they're going to do. So 1,100 kids did end up coming to the United States, and I actually got to know some of them, including my friend Herbert's brother and sister. So we got to England. The whole Kinder Transport Organization, which finished the 10,000 kids that arrived from Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Austria. And when we got there, my brother, who was very bright and quiet, was taken in by a nice Jewish family. They immediately took him away. And the rest of us, especially me, I had become a troublemaker because I was angry. And we were sent all over England. My cousin was sent to a family who wanted a daughter. And I've seen some of the letters that she wrote. People used to keep letters in those days. I've seen copies of them where she spent 2 horrible years until she finally accepted and became their daughter. And I now have a lovely Scottish family. Her name was Rita Straussman McNeil. She gave up a lot, but she kept her mother's name, Straussman. And the first family that took me in were able to tolerate me for 24 hours because I was trouble. And I went from one family to another. And finally, I ended up with a decent Christian family who actually found me on YouTube, the grandchildren, and I'm still in touch with them. And I was with them for 3 years. In school, I was only trouble, and I was 10 years old, and I hadn't learned how to read. And I got something I hope you all have, and that is a fabulous teacher. And in 1 year, she was able to take me from anger to being a lot more normal and learning enough so I could pass the 11s, which in England at that time meant you could continue on in school. If you failed it, you wouldn't. So in England, I found that the people were very tolerant. And I'll give you an example. I went to a 50th reunion, and somebody came up to me and says, give me, this was a Kinder Transport reunion, and said, give me a story I can make a headline. And I said, let me say thank you to Hinton Knowles. And to my amazement, he took out his cell phone and he tapped his fingers on it and said, quote. Now, this was like 70 years later or something. And so I started talking, getting no reaction on the other side. Then I said, don't you remember your daughter came home from college and gave me a stamp collection, I still have it, And she said, that was me. And I had a beautiful conversation with her. And I turned to the guy, I said, how did you have the phone number? I said, that's crazy. He said, do you think she's the only one who reached out and helped? You were not the only troublemaker. And she had made a huge difference in my life. And it's amazing what kind of an impact you can have somebody who's troubled when you reach out. When I got to America, and somehow or the other, a little bit of my story had preceded me, and I arrived and I went to Freehold High School, and the guy came up to me and said, I'm going to be your friend until you get to know people. He really didn't become my friend, but I will never forget that, because you can have such a huge impact on somebody who looks like he's a little bit lost. So, did anybody ask me how I got to America? Oh, you did. And anyway, so my uncle was somebody who had a lot of trouble controlling his temper. And he was in a concentration camp in Holland. And he saw a pregnant woman getting kicked in the stomach, and he never told me this story. I got it from somebody who was there. And he went and he, within 2 seconds, knocked the guard unconscious. Very quickly, he was knocked unconscious and thrown on a train to be taken to his death. And Holland, which was not a good place for a Jew to hide, they did have an underground, and they heard about it, and they got him off the train and took him to somebody who wanted to make a difference. He was a printer, and he had printed documents for 1,200 Jewish young men saying that they were on a mission for the Nazis. And with those papers, all of them survived, every one of them. And my uncle was given these papers. He was able to get from Holland to France to Africa. In Africa, he wrote to somebody in the United States who got a hold of somebody else who was very influential. And in 1942, he, together with his wife, arrived at Ellis Island. When you arrived at Ellis Island, if you were sick, they would send you back in those days. And my aunt had stomatitis. They didn't catch it. She spent 5 weeks in the hospital, and then she worked 12 hours a day sewing, doing something, and my uncle went in, did the same thing, and they saved up $1,500 and bought a chicken farm in Farmingdale. And in 1946, they brought me and my brother to the United States, and that's how I got there. Is there another question? Yeah.
How did you feel when you found out you were getting everything taken away from you?
How did I feel?
When you found out you were getting everything taken away from you?
When I had everything taken away from me? Well, I never cried. I just got angrier and angrier, and with a problem to everybody around me. Yeah.
Have you ever saw Hitler like face to face?
No, I never did see Hitler, although when I was, just before I turned 6, I snuck out of the house and went to a Nazi rally and got a good beating from my mother because she was scared stiff for me.
What did the Nazis take from you during the war?
What did they take? Well, the first thing that they did was we had to put a J in the store window. And So what I really remember is that our friends, the ones who were not Jewish, one by one, none of them turned against us. They didn't want anything bad to happen. They just turned around and walked away. And they didn't say anything, they didn't do anything. I like to tell the story about a Greek island. The Germans took over, and they went to the mayor and said, if you want to be alive and well, give us a list of all the Jews on the island. And they gave them the list, and they all got killed. And this is a natural story. And they went to another island, and they asked him, they said, we're coming back tomorrow for that list, and you better have it. And there was the archbishop from the church and the mayor, and they handed him the list. It had the name of the mayor and the archbishop. He said, that's the only Jews on this island. All the Jews on that island survived. They didn't bother to match with that. And there's many stories like that, but there's much more stories.
How many years were you in Germany? How many years were you in Germany?
I was in Germany. I was born in 1932, and we were taken to the border in the beginning of 39, so I'm a little less than 70 years. There was another, yeah? How old am I? Well, I'm not going to be 100 for 10 years, so that makes me 90, I think. So, go ahead. How did I want? After World War II, naturally, I was thrilled, and at that point, I still didn't know. I was still in England, and I felt that I had no future. I had got. I think there was only one letter I remember receiving from anybody, and the idiot teacher read it in class, and everybody laughed at me. After that, I really didn't. After that, I didn't get any letters until the war was over, and that's when I came to the United States. Yeah.
Were you happy that you were free and alive?
No, was I happy? No, I was just angry.
So that you were free from...
You know what the amazing part is? That the Hinton Knowles who reached out to me and made such a difference. I have no idea where she came from, but somehow or the other she found me. But there were others who reached out and made such a huge difference. And what the lesson I got from that is that I try to reach out when I see somebody who looks like they're lost. And we can all do that. Yeah.
How long were you in England for?
I was in England 7 years, and when the last 3 years that I was with this Christian family, I shared a bedroom with Donald, who was 2 years younger than me, and we became friends after the war. I visited him, he visited me, and we both agreed that we never had a fight in the whole 3 years we were together. And his children found me on YouTube, and they live in Australia, and I'm in touch with them, which I really love. Yeah.
Did you travel on boxcars?
Did I?
Travel on boxcars.
One more time.
Did you travel on boxcars?
Did I travel on a box? No, no, you mean like the horse and cart thing? No. But I do remember that I was in England and one of the people who had reached out to me gave me a birthday present. It was a ride in a car. I'd never been in a car before, and that was very exciting. I can still remember who the lady was, and somehow or the other, she knew that I was in trouble, making trouble, and reached out and made a difference. And so that's one of the reasons I talk, because I'm totally convinced that we can all make a difference. So I got a call that somebody was putting stones in the pavement in front of the houses where Jews had lived that they had killed, and that they were going to do it in front of my parents' house. And they asked me to come. I did. One of my granddaughters came with me, and two things happened. First of all, the minister was speaking when the guy was putting the stones in, and there were tears in his eyes. And I asked him, why do you have tears in your eyes? You were not alive. You had nothing to do with it. And he sucked his breath in and said very quietly, my church was. Well, the church was not responsible for what happened, but they didn't come out forcefully and try to put a stop to it. So he was right. But there was this man with 3 children, and this is a picture of the 3 children. And he said, I have my 3 children here with me who were the same age as you were at that time. And I want them to understand what happened and how it happened so that they can fight to make sure it doesn't happen again. And it used to be, way back when I met a German person, I would tighten up because of the horrors that the Germans had done. And then I started to see, I'm very active. I like to go to demonstrations for what I believe in. I like to go to demonstrations for the environment, so we have a planet that we can pass on to the next generation, which isn't all messed up, and for peace and against war and against genocide. And I always saw young German people, and they were there because they felt that what their parents had stood by, they weren't going to be standing by. And so now I have some beautiful German friends. At one point, I decided that I wanted to retrace the steps of what had happened to my family, and it turned out to be 1,700 miles because I wanted from where my parents had gone to and where they'd been killed, and all the way back to my hometown. And I said I'm doing it on a bicycle. I didn't. The last 200 miles I did on a bicycle. I didn't want to get on a train because of the memories. And the good part about it was the people that, the last 200 miles, the people we met along the way. One young man from my hometown in Germany joined us, and he wrote me a letter a couple of years ago saying, this is the best time in my life. I'm teaching refugees German, and I'm volunteering to make them settled in Germany, and I'm dealing with refugees, and this is fantastic. He's feeling great. And later, I mean now, a lot of the haters have come out into the open. They were very quiet for a while, and he wrote that even in Germany, I'm sad to say that we do have racism. And when you see something bad, please spoke up. Any more questions? This is a picture of my mother. She sent it to some kind of relative, and she put an X on her apron there so that I would know who she is, because she knew. This is something which is on the Holocaust Center with my name on it. When we stand by and listen as others are put down, we become part of the problem. When we speak out against hatred, we start to be the solution, and we can all be the solution. This is my sister and me, and my brother. Let's see. Oh, so this is a picture of my sister's class. There's 43 girls, and 3 of them are Jewish. And the idea that you've got to, that 3 of these girls got to get killed because they have a Jewish grandparent. I mean, it is so sick. Every one of these girls has much more in common with each other, just like you have much more in common with each other and with anybody else than you have differences. I like this picture. It's President Obama. He invited me to the White House to light the candles for Hanukkah, Jewish holiday. And when I got the invitation, I was sitting there and I'm getting misty-eyed looking at a picture of my sister, which is right by my desk because I think about her every day. And my granddaughter called, and I was telling her the story, and she said, just take that picture, make a copy, and you'll put it in your pocket when you go to the White House, and Ruth will be with you. And so I did that, and I got to the White House, and I got to spend some time with the Obamas to talk about refugees. And the reason they had invited me, they were looking for somebody who was doing something with refugees and who had been a refugee. So that's why they chose me. And when I told names, when I told Mrs. Obama the story and showed her the picture, the president heard it, and he ran over and called a photographer. So I got this nice picture of him holding a picture of my sister, which told me something about his humanity. But my life is really good, and I think the reason it's good is because of the volunteer things I do. I give you an example. The Hudson River was like a sewer, it was horrible, and I wanted to do something about it, didn't know what. I joined a group called Clearwater, and me and my wife, we volunteered 6 days at a time. We went there dozens of times, and we went to demonstrations. In the Hudson River, you can swim from one end to the other. We really made a difference. I so urge you to look for things to volunteer in. I'm on the boat, and there was a group doing, it was a Quaker group, Alternative to Violence. And I got so excited about what they were doing. They have volunteers doing 3-day workshops in prisons about how you can win without the other guy losing. And I just loved what they were doing. I joined their board, and I did dozens of prison workshops. where I really felt there's nothing better than feeling that you made a difference in somebody's life. At one point, a bunch of us decided that we need to get together with some people from Russia to help to clean up the environment and to create peace. Sad to say, it sounds like we didn't do too well with that. But we did at the time, and we took that 28-day sail with 20 Russian people from the Soviet Union, and we're still in touch with them. And I get excited about volunteering, and I think you can all make a difference by doing that. Thank you.
As you're walking by, take a look at the pictures as we walk out, if you want to. No, wait.
Oh, I would like to say this picture. So I get this message. My brother, he died a long time ago. He had a beautiful life. Before he died, he said he used to lecture in Germany, among other places, and the people in my hometown say that Ruth is alive and she has a child, and maybe, he says, maybe you want to go and spend 2 minutes there, don't spend more. So I did go, went with my wife, and we got a local historian to put her picture in the papers, and out of her, there was 43 kids in her class, 20 of them I got to talk to. And one by one they were saying she's alive, she's in Poland somewhere, and I spent time with each of them and found out that one of them said, the whole thing is nonsense. We can't face up to the fact that we didn't say a word, we turned our back, and we just couldn't, so we made up this story, and we convinced ourselves. So I look at the memorial to the Jews that they had killed, and my sister's name isn't on it, and I told a friend, and he got somebody to go there, and if you look at the memorial, you'll see all these names which are blurred out, but there's my sister's name that they just put in. So, again, it was because they couldn't face up to the fact that they were bystanders. Don't be a bystander. Thank you.